I stared at the golden embossed invitation in my trembling hands, reading the elegant script for the third time. Dad's 60th birthday celebration at Grandview Mountain Resort. But beneath the formal wording, Claire had added her own handwritten message in purple ink. Sophisticated evening, no +1s for single parents. We don't need your childcare drama at Dad's milestone celebration. My 7-year-old daughter, Emma, peered over my shoulder, her bright eyes curious about the fancy card. "Why do you look sad, Mommy?" she asked, her small voice cutting through my shock. I forced a smile, folding the invitation carefully, while my mind raced with possibilities. This would be the last time my sister underestimated me. The morning after receiving that cruel invitation, I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was happening in my family. Claire's message wasn't just thoughtless, it was calculated. I decided to call Dad directly, something I realized I hadn't done in months. "Dana, sweetheart." Dad's voice boomed through the phone, genuinely surprised. "I was just thinking about you and Emma. How are my girls?" His warmth confused me. "I'm fine, Dad. I got the invitation to your birthday party." There was a pause. "What invitation?" Claire said. "You've been too busy with single mom responsibilities to attend family functions. She told me you declined the last 3 events because you couldn't find childcare." My blood ran cold. "Dad, I never received invitations to any events in the past 2 years. "That's impossible. Claire specifically said she spoke with you about Thanksgiving Christmas dinner and my retirement party last spring. She said you felt overwhelmed and preferred to focus on Emma." I sank into my kitchen chair, the pieces clicking together. "Dad, I haven't spoken to Claire in 6 months. The last conversation we had was when she told me I was setting a bad example for Emma by working 2 jobs instead of remarrying." The silence stretched between us. Dad's breathing became heavier. "Dana, are you telling me Claire has been lying about your responses to family invitations?" "I never got any invitations, Dad. This birthday card is the first family communication I've received since Emma's 6th birthday party, which Claire spent criticizing my choice to serve grocery store cake instead of hiring a professional baker." Dad's voice shifted, anger creeping in. "She told me you said the family gatherings were too stressful for a single mother to navigate. She said you preferred keeping Emma away from family chaos." My chest tightened as I realized the scope of Claire's manipulation. She hadn't just excluded me. She'd crafted an entire narrative about my choices, painting me as overwhelmed and antisocial, while positioning herself as the protective sister, shielding the family from my drama. "Dad, I've been waiting for invitations. I thought you'd forgotten about us after the divorce." "Forgotten about you?" His voice cracked. "Dana, you're my daughter. Emma is my only granddaughter. I would never forget about you. I've been respecting what I thought were your boundaries." I explained the hurtful message on the birthday invitation, reading Claire's words verbatim. Dad's sharp intake of breath told me everything. "She wrote that on your invitation about childcare drama." "Yes, and it specifically says, no +1s for single parents. Dad, I haven't been declining invitations. I haven't been receiving them." The conversation continued for another hour as we pieced together Claire's systematic exclusion. Dad revealed that Claire had been handling all family communication for the past 2 years, supposedly to reduce his stress as he approached retirement. She'd convinced him that managing family coordination was her way of helping. "She always updates me after events about how everyone's doing," Dad said quietly. "She tells me you send your love, but that attending would be too complicated with Emma's schedule." "I never sent any messages, Dad. I thought you'd stopped caring about us." After we hung up, I sat in my empty apartment processing 2 years of unnecessary loneliness. Emma was at school, giving me space to absorb the betrayal. My sister hadn't just been thoughtless. She'd been deliberately cruel, isolating me, while convincing our father that the isolation was my choice. I thought about Claire's privileged life married to Marcus, a successful surgeon living in their 5-bedroom house with 2 nannies for their twin boys. She'd never struggled financially, never worried about childcare during school holidays, never had to choose between groceries and Emma's dance lessons. But why actively exclude me? What did she gain from keeping me away from family? That evening, as I helped Emma with homework, I made a decision. I would attend Dad's party despite the humiliation. But first, I needed to understand what I was walking into. I opened my laptop and searched for Grandview Mountain Resort. The website showcased luxury accommodations, a championship golf course, and event spaces that cost more than I made in 3 months. Claire had chosen this venue to emphasize the gap between her world and mine. As I scrolled through the resort's information, something caught my eye in the About Us section. The ownership structure mentioned several partners and investors, including a reference to historical family holdings dating back to the resort's founding in 1968. A strange feeling crept up my spine. 1968 was the year my grandmother bought her first investment property in Colorado. The next morning, I called Robert Sterling, the family lawyer who'd handled Grandma's estate 3 years ago. I'd been too overwhelmed during the divorce to pay attention to the details, trusting Claire to manage everything since she had power of attorney for family financial matters. Dana. What a pleasant surprise. Robert's voice was warm but surprised. I haven't heard from you since we finalized your grandmother's estate. How are you managing with your inheritance? My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. My inheritance? Your grandmother's bequest. The trust fund, the property investments, the resort shares. You should have been receiving quarterly dividend payments for 3 years now. The room spun around me. Robert, I never received any inheritance information. Claire told me Grandma left everything to charity after some legal complications. The silence on Robert's end was deafening. When he spoke again, his lawyer voice was sharp and careful. Dana, your grandmother, left you 40% ownership in Grandview Mountain Resort, plus a trust fund worth approximately $2.7 million. The dividend payments alone should have provided you with $60,000 to $70,000 annually. I couldn't breathe. That's impossible. I've been working 2 jobs to afford Emma's daycare. I use food stamps. I buy her clothes at thrift stores. Dana, I need you to come to my office immediately. Bring any financial documents you've received since your grandmother's death. We may have a serious problem. 2 hours later, I sat in Robert's office while he spread documents across his mahogany desk. Bank statements, ownership certificates, dividend records, all bearing forged signatures in my name. These endorsements on the dividend checks aren't your signature. Robert confirmed, comparing them to my actual signature from the estate paperwork. Someone has been intercepting and cashing your payments for 3 years. Claire, I whispered. She had access to your mail during the estate process, Robert continued. As your father's financial power of attorney, she was helping coordinate family affairs during your grandmother's illness. But this, he gestured at the forgeries, this is fraud. The numbers were staggering. Claire had stolen over $200,000 from me, while I struggled to pay rent on our tiny apartment. While I worked nights at a diner after Emma went to bed, Claire was cashing checks that belonged to us. Why didn't you contact me when the checks weren't being deposited properly, I asked. Robert looked embarrassed. The checks were being deposited, Dana, into an account with your name on it. I had no reason to suspect fraud. The address on file was Claire's house, which she said was temporary while you found stable housing after the divorce. I stared at the ownership documents for Grandview Mountain Resort. My name was listed as holding 40% of the property, making me the second largest shareholder after the founding family's trust. Robert, my sister, is throwing my father's birthday party at a resort I partially own. Yes, and as an owner, you have certain rights regarding events held on the property. You could actually authorize or refuse any gathering. A plan began forming in my mind. Claire thought she was hosting her sophisticated evening at an exclusive venue where I didn't belong. She had no idea she was throwing a party on my property with my stolen money. I want to attend this party, I told Robert, but I want to do it right. What do you mean? I want to contact the resort management and introduce myself as an owner. I want to understand my rights and responsibilities. And I want documentation proving Claire's theft ready for when this explodes. Robert smiled grimly. I'll prepare everything. But Dana, are you sure you want to confront this publicly? We could handle the financial fraud privately. I thought about 3 years of struggling while Claire lived lavishly on my money. 3 years of Emma asking why we couldn't afford things her cousins had. 3 years of feeling like a failure while my sister presented herself as the successful daughter. She's been stealing my money while telling my father I'm too irresponsible to attend family events. She's convinced everyone I'm an unstable single mother who brings drama wherever I go. Robert, I'm done hiding. That afternoon, I called Grandview Mountain Resort and asked to speak with the general manager about ownership matters. Within minutes, Jackson Torres was on the line, his voice shifting from polite customer service to respectful attention when I identified myself. Ms. Dana, we've been trying to reach you for 3 years regarding owner communications, he said. Your contact information on file shows a P.O. box that's been returning our mail. Another piece of Claire's deception. She'd given the resort a fake address to intercept my owner correspondence. Mr. Torres, I'll be attending an event at your resort this Saturday evening, a 60th birthday celebration hosted by my sister Claire. I'd like to discuss my ownership privileges. Of course. As a 40% owner, you have full access to all resort amenities and the authority to modify any event details. Would you like me to coordinate directly with you regarding the celebration arrangements? Not yet, but I may need your assistance during the evening. I'll explain when I arrive. That evening, I stood in my bedroom looking at the simple black dress that had belonged to Grandma. It wasn't designer like Claire's wardrobe, but it was elegant and dignified. Emma helped me choose jewelry, her excitement infectious, as she picked out Grandma's pearl earrings. You look beautiful, Mommy. Are you going to have fun at Grandpa's party? I knelt down to her level, smoothing her curly hair. I'm going to tell the truth, sweetheart, and sometimes telling the truth is scary but important. Like when I told you I broke the lamp even though I was afraid you'd be mad. Exactly like that. The truth helps people understand what really happened. As Mrs. Patterson, our trusted babysitter, arrived for the evening, I felt a strange calm settling over me. For 3 years, I'd accepted Claire's version of my life, that I was struggling because I'd made poor choices, that I was overwhelmed because single motherhood was too much for me to handle, that my family's distance was natural given my circumstances. But none of it was true. I wasn't failing. I was being sabotaged. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was being isolated. And I wasn't unwelcome at family events. I was being deliberately excluded while someone else controlled the narrative. Claire had built her sophisticated world partly on my stolen inheritance, while positioning herself as the stable, successful sister. Saturday evening at Grandview Mountain Resort, that illusion was going to shatter. Saturday evening arrived crisp and clear, typical for Colorado in October. As I drove up the winding mountain road to Grandview Resort, the familiar weight of anxiety settled in my stomach. 3 years of financial struggle had trained me to feel out of place in expensive settings, but tonight felt different. Tonight, I belonged here more than anyone else in that ballroom. The resort's grand entrance took my breath away. Towering pine trees framed the rustic yet elegant lodge, while warm light spilled from floor-to-ceiling windows. Valet attendants in crisp uniforms directed luxury cars to parking spaces, and I felt suddenly self-conscious about my 10-year-old Honda Civic. But then I remembered, I owned 40% of this place. Inside, the main ballroom had been transformed into Claire's vision of sophistication. Ice sculptures depicting mountain landscapes graced each corner, their crystal surfaces reflecting the light from 3 enormous chandeliers. A string quartet played softly near the dance floor while servers in black uniforms circulated with champagne flutes and elegant hors d'oeuvres. Claire stood near the entrance greeting guests, stunning in a midnight blue gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her blonde hair was swept into an intricate updo, and diamond earrings caught the light as she laughed with arriving family members. Marcus stood beside her in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his smile polite but distant. When Claire spotted me, her expression faltered for just a moment before recovering with practiced grace. "Dana, I'm so surprised you decided to come after all. I wasn't sure our family events were really your style anymore." The barb was delivered with a smile, but several nearby relatives heard it clearly. I noticed Aunt Susan and Uncle Jim exchange glances, probably remembering Claire's explanations about my absence from previous gatherings. "I wouldn't miss Dad's 60th for anything," I replied evenly. "Family is important to me." Dad appeared from across the room, his face lighting up when he saw me. He looked distinguished in his navy suit, the gray at his temples, making him appear distinguished rather than old. When he hugged me, I could feel his genuine happiness. "There's my girl. You look beautiful, sweetheart. Just like your grandmother in that dress." Claire's eyes narrowed at the comment, but she maintained her hostess smile. "Yes, it's very vintage. How charming that you kept Grandma's old clothes." The dismissive comment stung, but I'd expected it. Claire had always been an expert at delivering insults disguised as observations. As the evening progressed, I circulated through the crowd, reacquainting myself with family members I hadn't seen in years. Each conversation revealed more of Claire's systematic manipulation. Cousin Beth mentioned how sorry she was about my struggles with depression following the divorce. Uncle Tom asked if I was getting the help I needed for my stress management issues. Aunt Linda wondered if I'd found more stable housing yet. None of these concerns were based on conversations with me. They were all variations of stories Claire had told to explain my absence from family gatherings. She'd painted me as emotionally unstable, financially irresponsible, and overwhelmed by single motherhood. The most painful moment came when my cousin Sarah approached with genuine sympathy in her eyes. "Dana Claire told us about your troubles with child services. I want you to know the whole family supports you in getting back on your feet." My blood turned to ice. What troubles with child services? Sarah's face reflected confusion and growing concern. "The investigation into Emma's care. Claire said you were working with social workers to improve your parenting situation after some reports about neglect." I stared at Sarah, speechless. Claire had told our family that I was under investigation by Child Protective Services. She'd created a narrative where I was not only financially struggling, but actively failing as a mother. "Sarah, there has never been any investigation. Emma and I have never had any contact with child services. We're doing wonderfully together." Sarah's face went pale, but Claire showed us documentation. She said she was helping coordinate with the caseworkers. "What documentation?" "Reports about missed school days, inadequate nutrition, unstable housing conditions. She said you asked for privacy while you worked through the issues, which is why you haven't been attending family events." I excused myself and walked toward the ladies' room, needing a moment to process this latest revelation. Claire hadn't just stolen my money and isolated me from family. She'd actively destroyed my reputation with lies about child endangerment. In the marble-appointed restroom, I splashed cool water on my wrists and looked at myself in the gilt-framed mirror. Grandma's dress fit perfectly, and despite Claire's cutting remarks, I looked elegant and dignified. More importantly, I looked like someone who belonged in this sophisticated setting, because I did belong here. When I returned to the ballroom, I noticed Jackson Torres, the resort manager, standing discreetly near the back wall. He caught my eye and nodded slightly, ready to assist when needed. The knowledge that I had an ally in the room strengthened my resolve. The evening's program began with Marcus giving a toast to Dad's 60 years of life and achievement. His speech was polished and appropriate, touching on Dad's career success and family devotion. Then Claire took the microphone, her voice carrying clearly across the elegant space. "I want to thank everyone for celebrating our family tonight." She began, her smile radiant under the chandeliers. "Dad has always been the foundation of our stable, successful family unit. Some families struggle with drama and instability, but Dad taught us the value of consistency, responsibility, and making wise choices." Her eyes found mine across the room as she continued. "Tonight represents everything Dad has built. a family that prioritizes success, stability, and protecting our loved ones from unnecessary stress and complications. The speech was ostensibly about Dad, but everyone in the room understood its real target. Claire was publicly reinforcing her narrative about family stability while subtly highlighting my supposed deficiencies as the problematic daughter who brought stress and complications. As applause filled the ballroom, I made my decision. Claire had spent 3 years building her version of our family story, positioning herself as the responsible sister, protecting everyone from my chaos, while stealing the inheritance that could have changed Emma's and my life completely. But tonight in this ballroom at the resort, I partially owned the real story was finally going to be told. As the applause from Claire's speech faded, I found myself walking toward the microphone before I'd fully decided what to say. The ballroom's conversations quieted as guests noticed my movement, and Claire's confident smile faltered when she realized I intended to speak. I'd like to say a few words about our family, too. I announced, my voice carrying more clearly than I'd expected. Claire's grip tightened on the microphone stand. "Oh, that's not necessary, Dana. We know you're not comfortable with public speaking, especially in formal settings." Another dismissive comment designed to diminish me in front of our family, but this time I didn't step back. "Actually, I'm very comfortable speaking truthfully about our family," I replied gently, taking the microphone from her hands. "Dad, family, friends, I want to address some misconceptions that have been circulating about my life and choices." Dad stepped forward, his expression curious but supportive. "Of course, sweetheart. We'd love to hear from you." Claire moved closer, her voice tight with barely contained panic. "This really isn't appropriate, Dana. Tonight is about celebrating Dad, not rehashing personal issues." "You're absolutely right, Claire. Tonight should be about family and truth and celebrating genuine relationships." I turned to address the crowd directly. "For the past 3 years, many of you have heard that I've been declining family invitations because single motherhood has overwhelmed me. You've heard that I'm struggling with mental health issues and that Child Services has concerns about my parenting." A murmur rippled through the gathered family members. Claire's face went white. "These stories aren't true." I continued steadily. "I haven't been declining family invitations. I haven't been receiving them. I haven't been struggling with mental health issues. I've been deliberately isolated from family communication. And there has never been any Child Services investigation of my parenting." Uncle Tom frowned, looking between Claire and me. "But Claire showed us the documentation about the investigation. She said you needed family support while you worked with social workers." "What documentation?" I asked directly. Claire stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Dana, you're embarrassing yourself and confusing everyone. We've all been trying to support you through your difficulties." "Then show everyone this documentation, Claire. Show them the Child Services reports you've been sharing." Claire's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. The silence stretched across the ballroom as 50 family members and friends waited for her response. "Those documents are confidential," she finally managed. "I was protecting Dana's privacy by not discussing details publicly." "Convenient," I replied, "since no such documents exist because no investigation has ever occurred." Dad stepped closer to us both, his expression growing stern. "Claire, what's going on here? Are you saying you have documentation about Dana that I haven't seen?" Claire's desperation was becoming visible. "Dad, you know how overwhelming single motherhood can be. Sometimes people need help accepting reality about their situations. I've been trying to protect both of you from unnecessary conflict." "What kind of protection?" Dad demanded. "The kind where I've been intercepting communications and making decisions about what's best for our family stability." Claire snapped her composure, finally cracking. The admission hung in the air like a physical presence. Family members exchanged shocked glances as they processed what Claire had just confessed. "You've been intercepting communications." Dad's voice was deadly quiet. Claire realized her mistake immediately. Not intercepting, coordinating, managing family logistics so you don't have to worry about complicated situations. "Like what complicated situations?" I pressed. Like single mothers who can't manage their responsibilities, bringing drama to family events. Claire's voice rose sharply. Like people who make poor choices expecting the rest of us to accommodate their chaos. The venom in her voice shocked even her closest friends. Marcus stepped forward, his face troubled. Claire, maybe we should discuss this privately. No. Claire whirled to face him. I'm tired of everyone pretending this situation is normal. Dana shows up tonight looking for sympathy and attention. But where has she been for 3 years? Where was she when Dad needed family support during his retirement transition? She was waiting for invitations that you never sent, Dad said quietly, his understanding dawning. Because invitations would have led to drama just like this. Claire gestured wildly around the ballroom. Look what's happening right now. I planned a beautiful, sophisticated celebration for your 60th birthday, and she's turning it into a public confrontation about her personal problems. My personal problems? I asked incredulously. Claire, you've been telling people I'm mentally unstable and under child services investigation. You've been systematically excluding me from family events while convincing Dad that the exclusion was my choice. How exactly are these my personal problems? Claire's face contorted with frustration and something that looked like genuine hatred. Because everything has always been about you, poor Dana, struggling single mother. Poor Dana, abandoned by her husband. Poor Dana, working multiple jobs. Well, some of us built successful lives without constantly needing family sympathy. The cruelty in her words hit the gathered family like a physical slap. Even her closest friends looked uncomfortable with the level of animosity she was displaying. Successfully built on what? I asked quietly. On hard work and good choices and responsibility. Built on stolen inheritance money. The words left my mouth before I'd fully planned them, but once they were spoken, there was no taking them back. Claire's face went from red to absolutely pale in the space of 2 seconds. What did you just say? Dad's voice was sharp. Claire tried to recover. She's making wild accusations because she's embarrassed about her outburst. This is exactly the kind of unstable behavior I've been trying to protect our family from. Then let's clear this up right now, I said, turning toward the back of the ballroom where Jackson Torres stood waiting. Mr. Torres, could you please join us? Claire followed my gaze and saw the resort manager approaching with professional composure. Her expression shifted from defensive anger to something approaching panic. What is this about Dinah? Dad asked, his confusion genuine. It's about ownership, Dad, and inheritance, and 3 years of financial fraud. I looked directly at Claire as Torres reached our group. It's about the resort where we're celebrating tonight and who actually has the right to be here. Claire's voice was shrill with desperation. You're having some kind of breakdown, Dana. Someone needs to call security before this gets any worse. Actually, I said calmly, security is exactly what we need right now. Jackson Torres approached our group with professional composure, his presence immediately commanding attention from the gathered guests. Claire's panic was now visible to everyone in the room as she realized I had somehow coordinated with resort management. Is there a problem here? Torres asked politely, though his eyes focused on me with recognition and respect. Yes, there is a problem, Claire said quickly, trying to regain control of the situation. This woman is disrupting our private family celebration with wild accusations and emotional outbursts. I need you to escort her from the premises immediately. Torres' expression remained neutral as he turned to me. Ma'am, would you like to address this situation? Actually, Mr. Torres, I think our guests would benefit from understanding exactly who has the authority to make decisions about events at Grandview Mountain Resort. Claire stepped forward aggressively. I'm the party host. I arranged this entire celebration and paid for every detail. This is our family's private event, and I want this disruptive person removed from our celebration. I understand your concern, ma'am, Torres replied diplomatically. However, I need to clarify the ownership and authority structure of this establishment before taking any action. Dad frowned, clearly confused about why the resort manager was involved in our family dispute. What does resort ownership have to do with our situation? Torres turned to address the entire gathering, his voice professional but clear. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jackson Torres, General Manager of Grandview Mountain Resort. I need to inform you that this evening's celebration is taking place at a property that has multiple ownership stakeholders. What does that mean? Uncle Tom asked. It means that certain individuals have ownership rights that supersede event hosting privileges, Torres explained. Specifically, Ms. Dana holds a 40% ownership stake in Grandview Mountain Resort, making her the second largest shareholder of this property. The ballroom erupted into shocked murmurs as guests processed this information. Claire's mouth fell open in absolute disbelief. That's impossible, she whispered. I can provide documentation if needed. Torres continued calmly. Ms. Dana inherited her ownership stake 3 years ago through her grandmother's estate. As an owner, she has every right to be present at this facility and to authorize or modify any events held on the property. Dad stared at me with a mixture of shock and growing understanding. Dana, you own part of this resort. 40%, Dad. I inherited it from Grandma along with a trust fund worth over $2 million. I turned to look directly at Claire. Money that I never received because someone has been intercepting and cashing my dividend checks for 3 years. Claire's face had gone completely white. That's a lie. Grandma left her money to charity. There were legal complications with the estate. Torres reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder of documents. I have 3 years of dividend records showing quarterly payments issued to Ms. Dana's name, but deposited into an account she never authorized. The signatures on the deposits don't match her signature on file with our legal department. Let me see those, Dad demanded, his voice tight with controlled anger. As Torres handed over the documents, I watched Claire's carefully constructed world begin to crumble. Marcus stepped away from his wife, his face reflecting shock and shame. Claire, Marcus said quietly, did you know about Dana's inheritance? The situation was complicated, Claire stammered. Dana was going through a difficult divorce. She couldn't handle financial responsibilities. I was protecting the money until she was more stable. By forging her signature and stealing her dividend payments, Dad's voice was rising. It wasn't stealing, it was management. Someone had to make responsible decisions about family assets. Whose responsible decisions? I asked. Claire, you've been living off my inheritance money while telling everyone I'm a financial disaster. You've been using my stolen funds to maintain your lifestyle while I work 2 jobs to afford Emma's daycare. The magnitude of the betrayal was sinking in for everyone present. Aunt Susan gasped audibly while several cousins began whispering among themselves about the implications. How much money are we talking about? Uncle Jim asked grimly. Torres consulted his documents. The total amount of dividend payments over 3 years is approximately $212,000. Additionally, the trust fund principal has been earning interest that Ms. Dana should have been receiving. Dad turned to stare at Claire with an expression I'd never seen before. Complete disappointment mixed with anger. Claire, you let your sister struggle financially while you stole over $200,000 from her Kemptiinti. De Kondiinti Siu Raftars. I didn't steal anything. Claire's voice was becoming hysterical. I managed assets responsibly. Dana would have wasted that money on her chaotic lifestyle. What chaotic lifestyle? Dad demanded. Working multiple jobs to support her daughter, trying to build a stable life after her divorce. The lifestyle where she makes poor choices and expects family to clean up her messes? What poor choices, Claire? I asked calmly. Getting divorced from a man who abandoned Emma and me, working hard to support my daughter, trying to maintain my independence. Claire's desperation was making her increasingly vicious. The choice to have a child with someone unreliable. The choice to stay in a marriage that was obviously failing. The choice to burden the family with your emotional drama. The cruelty of her words shocked even her closest friends into silence. Dad's face flushed with anger. "Claire, how dare you speak about your sister and my granddaughter that way?" "Your granddaughter." Claire laughed bitterly. "When was the last time you even saw Emma? When was the last time Dana brought her to a family event? She uses that child as an excuse for everything. Because you never invited us to family events." I finally shouted, my composure breaking. "You've been excluding Emma and me for 3 years while stealing our inheritance and telling everyone we chose isolation. Because every time you're included, something like this happens." Claire gestured wildly around the ballroom. "Drama and confrontation and family disruption. This was supposed to be a sophisticated celebration of Dad's achievements, and you've turned it into a public spectacle. The only spectacle here is your 3-year campaign of manipulation and theft," Dad said coldly. Torres cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps this family discussion would be better continued in a private setting. As property management, I can provide conference space if needed. "No," I said firmly. "Claire chose to make this public when she spent 3 years lying to our family about my choices and character. She chose to make this public when she called me mentally unstable and claimed child services was investigating my parenting. She made this public and she can deal with the public consequences." Claire's last desperate attempt at control emerged as pure venom. "Fine. You want the truth. The truth is that some people never learn responsibility no matter how much help they receive. The truth is that I've been protecting this family from your poor judgment and emotional instability. The truth is that you shouldn't be around impressionable children until you prove you can make better life choices." The ballroom fell completely silent. Claire had just publicly accused me of being unfit for parenthood in front of 50 family members and friends. But instead of devastation, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Claire had finally revealed her true character to everyone present, and there was no taking back the ugliness they'd all witnessed. "Thank you, Claire," I said quietly. "Thank you for showing everyone exactly who you really are." The silence following Claire's vicious attack felt like a living thing in the ballroom. 50 family members and friends stared at her in shocked disbelief, finally seeing the calculated cruelty behind her sophisticated facade. Even Marcus looked horrified by his wife's words. Dad stepped forward, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. "Claire, I need to speak with you privately, now." "Dad, I'm trying to protect our family from—" "Now, Claire." Torres gestured toward a private conference room adjacent to the ballroom, and our immediate family followed Dad, Claire, Marcus, and me. The remaining guests stayed in the ballroom, their conversations a low buzz of shocked processing. Once the conference room door closed, Dad turned to face Claire with an expression I'd never seen before. Complete disappointment mixed with parental authority. "Claire, I need you to explain to me how you justified stealing over $200,000 from your sister, while convincing me she was choosing to avoid family contact." Claire's composure was completely shattered now, her earlier sophistication replaced by desperate defensiveness. "It wasn't stealing, Dad. It was asset management during a crisis period. Dana was falling apart after her divorce. Someone had to make responsible decisions. Responsible decisions like forging her signature, like lying to me about her responses to family invitations, like telling our relatives she was under investigation by child services." Marcus finally spoke, his voice tight with shame. "Claire, I told you months ago that this situation was getting out of hand. I told you that intercepting Dana's inheritance was wrong." Dad's head snapped toward Marcus. "You knew about this." "I knew Claire was managing some financial complications related to Dana's inheritance," Marcus admitted reluctantly. "But I didn't know about the forged signatures or the lies about family communications." "What did you know?" I asked quietly. Marcus couldn't meet my eyes. "I knew Claire had concerns about your financial stability after the divorce. She said the inheritance was complicated because of custody considerations and that she was working with lawyers to protect Emma's interests." "Emma's interests?" Dad's voice was sharp. Claire said if Dana received a large inheritance during custody proceedings, it might affect Emma's stability. She said she was holding the money in trust until the custody situation was resolved. I stared at Marcus in disbelief. My custody situation was resolved 3 years ago. Emma's father terminated his parental rights voluntarily. There have never been custody proceedings. Marcus's face went pale as he realized the extent of Claire's deception. Even he had been manipulated with lies about my situation. Dad turned back to Claire, his anger now mixed with something worse. Deep disappointment. Claire, you've been lying to everyone in this family for 3 years. You've stolen your sister's inheritance, damaged her reputation, and isolated her from family support during the most difficult period of her life. I was protecting everyone. Claire's voice was becoming shrill. Dana has always been dramatic and impulsive. She would have wasted that money on her chaotic lifestyle. What chaotic lifestyle, Claire Dad demanded. Working 2 jobs to support her daughter, going to night school to improve her career prospects, maintaining a stable home for Emma. She got divorced, Claire shouted. She chose to have a child with someone unreliable. She brought instability into our family. She was abandoned by someone who turned out to be unreliable, Dad corrected sharply. That's not a choice, Claire. That's a betrayal she had to overcome. And instead of overcoming it responsibly, she expected family support and sympathy. She expected basic human decency from her sister, Dad said coldly. Instead, you stole her money and destroyed her relationships with the people who love her. The weight of Dad's disappointment seemed to hit Claire for the first time. Her face crumpled as she realized that her carefully constructed justifications weren't convincing anyone. Dad, I was trying to help. Dana has always needed guidance. She makes emotional decisions without thinking about consequences. Like what emotional decisions, Claire? Like working multiple jobs instead of remarrying for stability. Like insisting on independence instead of accepting family help. Like prioritizing Emma's happiness over practical considerations. Dad stared at his elder daughter as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Claire, you're describing admirable qualities, not character flaws. Dana has been supporting herself and Emma with dignity and hard work, while you've been undermining her behind her back. I've been maintaining family stability. You've been maintaining family lies. Dad turned to me, his expression shifting to regret and love. Dana, I owe you the deepest apology of my life. I believed Claire's version of your choices, and I failed you as a father. Dad, you didn't know. I should have known. I should have called you directly. I should have insisted on seeing Emma regularly. I should have questioned why my youngest daughter and only granddaughter suddenly became too overwhelmed to attend family events. The pain in his voice broke something open in my chest. Dad, Claire is very convincing when she wants to be. She convinced me that respecting your boundaries meant accepting your absence. She convinced me that supporting you meant giving you space to work through your problems. She convinced me that being a good father meant trusting her judgment about family communications. Claire made one final desperate attempt at control. Dad, this is exactly what I was trying to prevent. Family conflict and emotional drama disrupting important celebrations. Dad looked at her with an expression of complete finality. Claire, the only drama here is the web of lies you've constructed. The only disruption is the discovery that my elder daughter has been systematically betraying her sister for 3 years. He turned back to me with tears in his eyes. Dana, I want to know my granddaughter. I want to be part of Emma's life. I want to make up for 3 years of lost time based on lies. She would love that, Dad. She asks about you all the time. And I want to make sure you receive every penny of your inheritance, plus interest, plus compensation for what you've endured. Claire's voice was small and desperate now. What about family forgiveness? What about moving forward together? Dad's response was quiet but absolute. Claire, forgiveness requires accountability. Moving forward requires truth. Until you can acknowledge the scope of what you've done and take responsibility for the damage you've caused, there's nothing to forgive. Are you cutting me out of the family? I'm removing you from any position where you can make decisions affecting other family members. You'll have no access to family financial information. You'll have no authority to coordinate family communications. And you'll have no involvement in inheritance or estate planning. The finality in Dad's voice seemed to break Claire completely. She looked around the room, desperately seeking support that wasn't coming. Marcus, tell them this is an overreaction. Marcus shook his head sadly. Claire, what you've done to Dana and Emma is unforgivable. I can't defend it, and I won't pretend it's acceptable. But our family will be fine, Marcus said quietly. But I need time to process how the woman I married could systematically destroy her sister's life while sleeping peacefully every night. Claire finally seemed to understand that her actions had consequences beyond her control. The sophisticated, successful persona she'd maintained was crumbling as everyone saw the calculating cruelty beneath. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered. But you did mean for it to go somewhere, I replied gently. Claire, you didn't accidentally intercept my inheritance or accidentally forge my signatures or accidentally lie to Dad about my family communications. Every single action was deliberate. I thought I was protecting everyone. You were protecting yourself. You were protecting your position as the successful daughter by ensuring I stayed in the role of the struggling single mother. You needed me to fail so you could succeed. The truth of that statement hung in the air like a physical presence. Claire had built her identity partly on the contrast with my supposed failures, and she'd worked actively to maintain that contrast by sabotaging my opportunities for success. Dad stood up slowly, looking older than his 60 years, but also somehow relieved. We're going back to the ballroom now. You can choose to join us for the remainder of the evening and begin making amends, or you can leave. But the lies end tonight, Claire. The manipulation ends tonight. The theft ends tonight. And if I stay, then you apologize publicly for the lies you've spread about your sister. You acknowledge your financial fraud, and you begin the process of making restitution for 3 years of damage. Claire looked around the room one final time, her sophisticated facade completely stripped away. For a moment, I thought she might choose accountability and begin the hard work of rebuilding trust. Instead, she lifted her chin with the same arrogance that had characterized her treatment of me for years. I won't be humiliated in front of our family and friends. If you all want to believe Dana's version of events, that's your choice. But I know what I was trying to accomplish, and I don't regret protecting our family's stability. With that final refusal to take responsibility, Claire walked out of the conference room, and as it turned out of our family celebration entirely. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new house, watching through the window as Emma played in our backyard with her grandfather. Dad was teaching her how to plant tomatoes in the garden we'd started together, his patience endless, as she carefully placed each seedling in the rich soil. Our life had changed dramatically since that evening at Grandview Mountain Resort. The recovered inheritance had provided financial security I'd never imagined possible. But more importantly, it had restored my relationship with Dad and given Emma the grandfather she'd always deserved to know. The legal resolution of Claire's theft had been swift once Robert Sterling presented the evidence to authorities. Claire was required to repay the full amount, plus interest and penalties, totaling nearly $300,000. She'd avoided criminal prosecution by agreeing to complete restitution and community service, but the financial strain had forced her and Marcus to downsize significantly. Marcus had filed for separation 2 months after the party, unable to reconcile his wife's systematic cruelty with the woman he'd thought he married. Their boys spent weekends with him in a modest apartment, learning to adapt to a simpler lifestyle while processing their parents' relationship breakdown. Dad visited Emma and me every Sunday, making up for 3 years of lost time with the enthusiasm of a man who discovered an unexpected treasure. Emma adored him, and their bond had grown strong quickly. He'd become the stable grandfather figure she'd never had, reading her bedtime stories during sleepovers and attending every dance recital and school play. The trust fund had allowed me to quit my evening job at the diner and focus on completing my nursing degree. Emma no longer attended after-school daycare. Instead, she came home to fresh cookies and help with homework, the kind of childhood stability I'd always wanted to provide but never could afford. This afternoon was special, though. We were celebrating Emma's 8th birthday with a party in our backyard, something that would have been impossible in our tiny apartment. Dad had helped plan every detail, his excitement about his granddaughter's birthday, touching and genuine. As I arranged fresh flowers on the picnic tables we'd set up under our oak tree, I reflected on how different this celebration felt from Claire's sophisticated evening at the resort. This party was about genuine relationships, honest affection, and family connections built on truth rather than manipulation. The doorbell rang and I went to answer it, expecting the first of Emma's school friends to arrive. Instead, I found Claire standing on my front porch, looking smaller somehow than I remembered. Her usual designer clothes had been replaced with simple jeans and a cotton sweater, and her face showed the strain of the past 6 months. "Hello, Dana. I was hoping I could speak with you for a few minutes." I studied her face, looking for signs of the calculating manipulation I'd learned to recognize. Instead, I saw something that looked like genuine remorse mixed with exhaustion. "Emma's birthday party starts in an hour, Claire. This probably isn't the best timing." "I know. I remember her birthday and I brought her a gift." She held up a small wrapped package. "I also wanted to talk with you about something important." I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me to give us privacy. "What do you want to talk about?" Claire took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I want to apologize. Really apologize, not the defensive justifications I offered that night at the resort." "Okay. I've been in therapy for 4 months now, trying to understand how I justified what I did to you and Emma. Trying to understand how I convinced myself that stealing from you and lying about you was somehow protective or noble." She looked toward the backyard where Emma's laughter carried on the afternoon breeze. I told myself I was managing family stability, but really, I was managing my own insecurity and jealousy. Jealousy of your resilience, of your independence, of the way you rebuilt your life after Tom left you, of the way Dad talked about your strength and courage when he didn't think I was listening. The admission surprised me. In my memories, Claire had always been the confident, successful sister who had everything together. "I built my identity around being the daughter who made good choices," she continued. "The one who married well, had financial security, maintained social standing. But when you survived your divorce and built a good life for Emma despite having no help, it challenged everything I believed about success and stability." I leaned against the porch railing, processing her words carefully. "So you decided to ensure I kept struggling." "I decided to convince myself that your struggles proved my superiority. And when Grandma's inheritance threatened to change your circumstances, I panicked. Because if I had financial security, you couldn't use my poverty as proof of your better choices." Claire nodded miserably. "The therapy has been brutal, Dana. Facing the truth about my motivations, about the systematic way I undermined you while convincing myself I was helping. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I understand now how deeply I hurt you and Emma." Through the window, I could see Dad pushing Emma on the tire swing he'd hung from our oak tree. Her delighted squeals filled the air as she soared higher, completely secure in his love and attention. "What do you want from me, Claire?" "Nothing, honestly. I wanted to take responsibility without asking for anything in return. But I also wanted to ask if there might be a possibility someday for me to have some kind of relationship with Emma." "Why?" "Because she's my niece. Because I've missed 3 years of watching her grow up. Because the boys ask about their cousin and wonder why we don't see her anymore." Claire's voice cracked slightly. "And because I want to be the aunt she deserves, not the person who tried to damage her mother." I thought about Emma's curious questions over the past months about why Aunt Claire had disappeared from our lives. I'd explained the situation in age-appropriate terms, focusing on the importance of honesty in families and the consequences of making hurtful choices. Claire rebuilding trust takes time, and it requires consistent actions, not just words. I know. Emma's well-being comes first. If you want to be part of her life, you have to prove that you can be a positive influence. I understand. The front door opened behind me and Dad appeared with Emma bouncing beside him, both of them grass-stained and grinning from their gardening adventure. Mommy Grandpa says the first tomatoes will be ready right before school starts. Emma announced, then noticed Claire and stopped short. Oh, hi Aunt Claire. Claire's face transformed at the sight of her niece, love and regret mingling in her expression. Hi, Emma. Happy birthday, sweetheart. You've grown so much. Emma looked between Claire and me, uncertainly picking up on the tension despite our careful control. Aunt Claire brought you a birthday gift, I said gently. Would you like to see what it is? Emma nodded and accepted the package with polite curiosity. Inside was a beautiful children's book about a brave girl who builds a garden to help her community, along with a set of real gardening tools sized for small hands. These are perfect for our garden, Emma said with genuine pleasure. Thank you, Aunt Claire. You're welcome, honey. I heard from Grandpa that you love gardening with him. Dad's expression was carefully neutral as he watched the interaction between his daughters and granddaughter. We'd talked extensively about Claire's potential return to our lives, and he'd supported whatever decision Emma and I made about rebuilding that relationship. Would you like to see our garden? Emma asked, her natural generosity overriding any confusion about family dynamics. Claire looked to me for permission, and I nodded. For a few minutes. Emma's friends will be arriving soon for her party. As we walked toward the backyard, Emma chattering about her tomato plants and the butterfly garden she'd planned for next spring, I felt a cautious hope about our family's future. Claire's apology had felt genuine, and her acknowledgement of her motivations seemed honestly earned through difficult self-examination. But more importantly, Emma was growing up in an environment filled with honest affection and stable relationships. Dad's presence in her life had provided the grandfather connection she'd always deserved, and our financial security had allowed me to focus on being the present engaged mother I'd always wanted to be. As Emma's friends began arriving for her party, filling our backyard with laughter and celebration, I realized that Claire's manipulation had ultimately failed in its deepest purpose. She'd tried to damage my relationship with family, but instead had led to stronger, more honest connections based on truth rather than manipulation. Dad helped coordinate party games, while Claire quietly assisted with refreshments, both of them working to create a joyful celebration for Emma. Watching them together, I saw the possibility of genuine family healing, built on accountability and truth rather than denial and defensiveness. The afternoon sun filtered through our oak tree as 8-year-old Emma opened gifts surrounded by friends and family who loved her unconditionally. In 6 months, we'd gone from isolation and financial struggle to security and authentic relationships. That evening, after the last guest had gone home and Emma had fallen asleep surrounded by birthday presents, Dad and I sat on the back porch talking about the day. I'm proud of you, sweetheart, he said quietly. The grace you showed Claire today, the life you've built for Emma, the strength you've demonstrated through everything. You're remarkable. I learned from the best dad. Your grandmother would be so proud of the woman you've become. She'd love knowing her inheritance helped you build this stability for Emma. She'd also love knowing it helped me learn my own worth, I replied. For 3 years, I believed Claire's version of my life. That I was struggling because I'd made poor choices, that I was isolated because I was overwhelming, that I was failing because single motherhood was too much for me. But none of that was true. None of it. I wasn't failing. I was being sabotaged. I wasn't overwhelming. I was being systematically excluded. And I wasn't making poor choices. I was surviving difficult circumstances with dignity and strength. Dad reached over and squeezed my hand. Emma is lucky to have you as her mother. And we're both lucky to have you as grandfather and father. As the evening stars appeared over our peaceful backyard, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. Claire's betrayal had been devastating, but its exposure had led to authentic family relationships and financial security that changed everything about our lives. Emma had her grandfather, her stable home, her mother's full attention, and the promise of educational opportunities we could now afford. I had my dignity restored, my family relationships rebuilt, and the knowledge that I could overcome betrayal and emerge stronger. The most important lesson from our experience wasn't about the danger of family manipulation or the importance of financial security. It was about the power of truth to transform relationships and the resilience that emerges when we stop accepting other people's definitions of our worth. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to stand in our truth, even when others try to diminish us. And sometimes the most profound healing comes not from avoiding betrayal, but from surviving it with grace and discovering our own unshakable strength. I wanted to ask you something that many of us face in our own families. Have you ever experienced a situation where someone close to you was undermining your relationships or opportunities while pretending to help? How did you find the courage to stand up for your truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please like this video if Emma and my story resonated with you. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about family resilience and personal strength, and share this with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by others' treatment of them. Thank you for listening to our journey, and I hope our story reminds you that healing and justice are possible even after deep betrayal. May you always have the courage to stand in your truth and the wisdom to recognize your own strength.